Derek Coleman is a man known and respected by everyone in the small town of Riverside. At 35 years old, he leads a simple life full of inner peace. He works as a maintenance technician at the local community center, a job that allows him to help others, whether it's repairing broken doors or fixing leaky faucets. This lifestyle fills him with satisfaction, and his warm character makes everyone in Riverside trust him. One afternoon, while returning home from a long day at work, Derek spotted a car stopped on the side of the road, its hazard lights flashing. Without hesitation, he approached and saw a young woman, Emma Rogers, visibly distressed by a flat tire. Although the situation seemed simple, the uneasiness in Emma's eyes piqued Derek's curiosity. With a friendly smile, he offered her help and quickly changed the tire, asking for nothing in return, although Emma insisted on paying him. He declined the offer, for it was his nature to help others. The next day, while enjoying his morning coffee, Derek noticed a luxurious black vehicle parked in front of his house, an odd detail for the quiet Riverside. At first he thought it might be someone visiting, but the car remained in place with no sign of activity. Although she tried to ignore it, a concern began to grow inside her. The vehicle kept appearing in different places where Derek was going, as if he was being followed. Determined to confront the mystery, Derek observed closely and noticed two figures that appeared to be watching him from inside the vehicle. Finally, one afternoon, two men in suits got out of the black SUV and drove to it. One of them, Michael Carter, introduced himself and explained that he worked for the influential Wallace family. By mentioning Emma Rogers, Derek understood the connection. Emma was the daughter of Henry Wallace, a wealthy businessman. Michael and his partner offered him a reward for his kindness, explaining that the Wallace family deeply appreciated those who showed a selfless sense of help towards their daughter. But Derek, a man of principle, was hesitant. He knew that accepting something from this powerful family could change his life, but he wasn't sure he wanted that kind of change. Despite his initial rejection, Derek couldn't help but wonder how he could use the offer to help his community. After reflecting and consulting with his close friends, Derek decided to accept the Wallace's proposal, on the condition that the funds be used to build a community centre in Riverside. He wanted that place to be a haven for those seeking support, education, and a sense of belonging. With the support of the Wallaces, the Riverside Community Centre became a vibrant space, full of life and hope. Derek stayed at the front, involved in every detail, making sure the venue reflected the values he had always stood for. However, over time, the influence of the Wallace family grew, and they soon suggested expanding the project to other towns. Derek began to face pressures and challenges he had never anticipated, as the offer, while generous, also involved compromises that threatened to divert his focus. As Riverside flourished, Derek maintained his independence and the values that defined him, facing difficult decisions that constantly challenged him. However, he always found a way to remain true to his principles, remembering that his true motivation was not power or influence, but the good of his community. Emma's presence in his life remained, now as a close friend, and someone who shared his vision of a better future. Together, they strived to make the community centre a symbol of change and hope, proving that a single act of kindness could transform many lives and build a lasting legacy. As Derek continued to develop the community centre in Riverside, signs began to emerge that the Wallace family's influence would not be so straightforward to manage. Every time he made decisions about the centre, a slight pressure from his sponsors was felt. Still, Derek remained steadfast in his commitment to serving the community in accordance with the values that had always guided his life. One day, while overseeing a new section of the centre for job training, Derek received an unexpected visitor. Michael Carter, the Wallace's representative, arrived at the scene accompanied by two assistants. Although his tone was polite, the conversation quickly made the purpose of the visit clear. Michael began with a smile. "The Wallace family is very pleased with the results, Derek, but they think you could do a lot more if you expand the community centre model to other cities. Imagine it, a network of centres like this in every community in need." Derek listened silently, understanding the implications of Michael's words. Accepting expansion would mean taking their project to a much larger scale. But it would also mean giving in to the Wallace family's terms and accepting their influence beyond Riverside. Looking at Michael, Derek felt that this offer had an undercurrent that troubled him. It was not a simple suggestion, but a veiled expectation. As the days progressed, the expansion proposal was on his mind. The centre in Riverside had begun to transform the lives of hundreds of people, and the prospect of multiplying that impact was tantalizing. However, his intuition warned him that perhaps the Wallaces' intentions were not as selfless as they seemed. One night, after a long day at the community centre, Emma visited him to get his thoughts on the proposed expansion. "Derek," he said, with an empathetic expression on his face, "I know you're worried about what this expansion might mean, but if you decide to do it, make sure it's for the right reasons." Derek nodded, feeling Emma's support as an anchor in the midst of the storm of doubt. "I don't want to lose what we've built here, Emma. The community needs a space that is not subject to the interests of outsiders, but the expansion could also help many other communities if we manage to maintain our independence." With renewed resolve, Derek decided to confront Michael and the Wallace family with a proposal of his own. The next day, he organized a meeting at the community center and explained his vision: to expand the model, but under certain conditions. He insisted that each new community center should have local autonomy, involve community leaders, and not rely exclusively on Wallace funds to avoid any potential outside control. Michael's face revealed a mixture of surprise and admiration. The Wallace family didn't expect Derek to come up with such a bold and risky alternative. However, Michael agreed to take the proposal to the family council. While waiting for the Wallaces' response, Derek continued his life in Riverside. The community had grown around the centre, and the place had become the heart of the city, attracting volunteers, donors, and local leaders who wanted to contribute. Derek's life, though increasingly busy, filled him with satisfaction, and his friendship with Emma had grown stronger, finding in her constant support and a reminder of why he had started all this. Finally, weeks later, the Wallaces' response came. They had agreed to Derek's terms, recognizing that his vision was critical to the success of the project. Now, Derek would have the opportunity to expand the Riverside model, but on the terms he had set himself, without compromising the values that defined it. Derek embarked on the task of bringing the community centre to new cities, while retaining its independence and ensuring that each community had a say in its own development. Although the challenges did not cease, each new achievement reminded him of the power of a simple decision and how an act of kindness could change not only his life, but also the lives of those around him. As Derek oversaw the expansion of the community centre model, he realized that each new community brought unique challenges. Local leaders in each city were enthusiastic and committed, but some local politicians were beginning to see him as an influential figure who could displace their own interests. In one of the cities, the mayor tried to take advantage of the project, trying to manipulate the funds for his own benefits. Derek, determined to protect the integrity of his project, stood up to the mayor firmly, hosting a public meeting where he allowed the community to voice their say in what they expected from the new centre. Transparency in their approach and their ability to maintain local control managed to win the support of the people and divert political interests. With each obstacle, Derek reaffirmed his values and the importance of staying true to his initial vision: to create real, positive change without interference from those who were only looking to profit. The pressure from the Wallaces was not long in coming. Although they had agreed to Derek's conditions, the family still expected some level of influence on the decisions. Michael Carter returned to Riverside for a conversation that soon turned into a subtle confrontation. "Derek," Michael began in a serious tone, "the family has invested heavily in these centres, and while we respect your terms, we think you could handle things with more flexibility." Derek stood by his stance. "My commitment is to the communities, not to the benefit of a powerful family. I appreciate the financial support, but I will not compromise the focus of each centre or give in to external pressures." Derek's determination began to gain recognition in the media, and he soon became a regional public figure, known not only for his community work, but also for his integrity and his resistance to the influence of powerful interests. This exposure brought with it new challenges and opportunities, as other donors became interested in supporting the project under the same terms that Derek had established. While all this was happening, Emma remained by his side, contributing ideas and actively participating in the growth of the project. The relationship between them grew in a deep bond of mutual support, based on respect for their ideals and shared work. The Riverside community saw in them an inseparable duo, a source of inspiration and change for all. Derek continued to expand his network of community centres, now with diversified financial backing that wasn't solely dependent on the Wallaces, allowing him to maintain control of every decision. Gradually, the dream that began with a simple act of kindness turned into a movement of social transformation. With each community centre he opened in different cities, Derek began to see how his efforts transformed entire communities. Each centre not only provided essential services, but also fostered a sense of belonging and purpose in residents. Parents, young people, and the elderly found in these centres a safe and accessible space where they could receive help, learn new skills, or simply feel part of a wider community. Meanwhile, the Wallace family, while still involved, seemed less and less interested in the day-to-day decisions of the project. This, however, was only an appearance. One night, Emma received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end of the line was that of a close contact of the Wallaces, who revealed that the family was planning to redirect a portion of the funds to projects that, although under the same name as the community centres, did not respect Derek's inclusive and transparent model. The information stunned her, and she knew immediately that she should share it with him. The next day, Emma went straight to the Riverside Community Centre, where Derek was wrapping up a meeting with local leaders. With a mixture of concern and urgency, he explained what he had discovered. "Derek, I think the Wallaces are using our project for something else. They are taking advantage of the image you have built to open centres that do not follow our standards, and I am afraid that they may damage everything you have achieved." Derek listened intently, feeling his usual calm give way to a mixture of frustration and disappointment. She knew that taking on such a powerful family was risky, but she also understood that she couldn't allow them to distort the purpose of community centres. That night, after hours of reflection, Derek made a decision. He called a press conference in Riverside where he would publicly denounce the situation and clarify the importance of maintaining the integrity of community centres. News of the conference garnered local and national media attention, and within days, Derek became the centre of a public debate about social responsibility and the use of funds for genuine purposes. Taking the microphone at the conference, Derek spoke clearly and passionately. "What we built here in Riverside was founded on principles of transparency and community service. I will not allow the work we have done to be diverted into interests alien to these values. Community centres are and always will be spaces of the people, for the people." His statement resonated across the country, and support from the community and many other organisations quickly multiplied. The reaction of the Wallace family was not long in coming. Michael Carter, representing the Wallaces, tried to contact Derek, but he avoided the meeting, knowing that any negotiations could jeopardise his purpose. Determined not to give in, he sought alliances with other entities and found support in foundations that shared his vision, thus ensuring that the centres continued to operate independently. As the project grew and Derek's name became more widely known, Emma stood by him, reinforcing the project and ensuring that each centre was true to the initial values. Together, they achieved something that no powerful family or outside interest had foreseen, creating a network of independent community centres dedicated to collective well-being, which were now replicated throughout the country. Every time he visited a new centre or saw a transformed community, Derek was reminded of how it all started with a simple act of kindness. That night when he decided to help Emma had been the beginning of a chain of events that he would never have imagined. Now, with a conviction stronger than ever, Derek understood that true power lay not in money or influence, but in positive impact and the ability to inspire others to build a better world. Following the press conference and the public support he gained, Derek felt a mixture of relief and deeper responsibility. Each new centre, each transformed community, and each person who found purpose in those spaces reminded him of the crucial of his struggle. But as the project gained traction and the network of community centres consolidated, Derek couldn't ignore that the Wallace family might try new strategies to regain control. A few months later, while Derek was overseeing the opening of a centre in a small neighbouring town, he received a formal letter from the Wallaces' lawyers. In the document, they demanded that the centres be named after the family and that they be publicly recognised as their primary sponsors. The letter included very specific terms which made it clear that the intention was to restore his image after Derek's statements at the press conference. For him to accept, that would be to betray everything he had stood for. Derek decided to consult Emma and the community leaders closest to him before responding. I knew that standing up to the Wallaces this time could lead to legal and financial repercussions that could directly impact the operation of the centres. But when he gathered his co-workers, he saw in their faces the same determination he felt in his heart. They all agreed on one thing: community centres should remain community spaces, free from external control. With the backing of his friends and collaborators, Derek wrote a formal letter rejecting the Wallaces' proposal. In it, he detailed that his commitment was to people and that he would not accept changing the identity of the centres for interests alien to those of the communities they served. This clear and direct message generated a groundswell of support from non-profits, educational institutions, and even influencers who saw in Derek a leader of integrity and dedicated to real change. However, the Wallace family did not retire so easily. One day, while returning from a meeting at one of the centres, Derek was surprised by a lawsuit notice. The Wallaces claimed that they had funded the centres with a considerable initial investment and were now seeking compensation for damage to their image due to Derek's press conference. Although the lawsuit appeared to be designed more to intimidate him than to proceed legally, the notice made it clear that the Wallaces would not stop in their attempts to control the project. Emma, always by his side, helped him form a legal support alliance with foundations and volunteer lawyers who believed in his cause. Despite the pressures, Derek refused to give in to the demands. As the legal battle progressed, people's support grew stronger, and in every community she visited, she found people willing to champion the legacy of community centres. The trial became a public event, and courtrooms were filled with residents of Riverside and the other benefited communities. During his testimony, Derek spoke from the heart, narrating how a simple act of helping an unknown person had triggered this whole story. This project is not mine or anyone else's. It is of each person who has found a place in these centres and who has contributed to building something greater than ourselves. When the judge issued the verdict in Derek's favour, the community celebrated. The community centres would remain in the control of the people who used them, and Derek was eventually freed from the influence of the Wallace family. The media told his story as that of an ordinary man who, with integrity and courage, challenged a powerful family and demonstrated that true strength lay in the union of people and their commitment to doing good. From then on, Derek continued to expand the centres into new cities, ensuring that each maintained the values and essence that had guided the first. Although the demands of his work increased, Derek stayed true to his roots, returning to Riverside frequently to participate in community events and always remember where he came from and what inspired him to keep going. Emma, now not only his friend but also his partner and confidant, accompanied him every step of the way, helping to strengthen the project and maintaining the connection with the communities. Derek's impact wasn't just limited to crosses. Her story inspired others to pursue their own community projects, to demonstrate that with a simple act of kindness, you could build chains of change. Derek Coleman became a symbol of what a determined and honest person could achieve. Every time I walked into a community centre and saw the smiling faces of those who found a safe place there, I knew that their journey, despite the obstacles, had been worth it. The centres were now his legacy and proof that when you work with conviction and generosity, it is possible to build a better world. With the verdict in his favour and complete control of the community centres, Derek experienced a moment of peace and gratitude, even though he knew this was just the beginning of a new phase. The battle against the Wallaces had strengthened his and his team's commitment, and he now had a larger support network than he ever imagined. Foundations, institutions, and people from all over the country who had followed his story offered their collaboration to expand the project without restrictions, but this time under the principles that he himself had defended. The centres began to grow and diversify in their service offerings, becoming places where mental health programs, skills development workshops, legal advice, and activities to promote social inclusion were taught. Each center reflected the identity of its community and was managed by local leaders, ensuring that each space was tailored to the unique needs of its residents. Derek knew that the key to maintaining the authenticity of the project was not to centralize power, and so he pushed for the creation of a National Council of Community Representatives, who would oversee decisions and ensure the independence of each center. As time went on, Derek and Emma became prominent figures in their country's social movement. Derek's story was told in documentaries and lectures, and he himself was invited to speak at universities and leadership events, where he shared not only the accomplishments of the project, but also the lessons about integrity and perseverance he had learned throughout his journey. Derek used these opportunities to inspire others to act out of kindness and never underestimate the power of a small decision. However, while the project was flourishing, Derek faced a personal crisis that led him to deep reflection. As the network of centers expanded and his popularity grew, he realized that his responsibilities were taking him away from his original community, Riverside. He felt that despite all the success, he was losing connection to the place that had seen him grow up and to the people who had been with him from the beginning. This generated in him an uncertainty that he could not ignore. Emma noticed this uneasiness in Derek, and one day, after a planning meeting, she took him to Riverside Community Park, where it had all started. "Derek," he said with a look full of understanding, "you've accomplished so much, but never forget that your purpose is not in numbers or fame, but in the heart of every community you serve. Maybe it's time to go back to your roots and remember the why of every step you've taken." Inspired by his words, Derek made a radical decision: to reduce his involvement in the national management of the project and delegate more responsibility to the leaders of each center, allowing the movement to grow autonomously. He decided to return to his duties in downtown Riverside, dedicating himself to working directly with people, as he had done from the beginning. There, he found renewed satisfaction in collaborating with his neighbors and friends, and with each little interaction, he was reminded of the reason he had started this journey. In Riverside, Derek dedicated himself to building the next generation of community leaders, youth and adults who showed a genuine passion for the well-being of others. Her focus became to leave a legacy of local leadership, teaching people not only to run the centers, but to cultivate the values of respect, service, and empathy in every decision. Emma, who also found deep purpose in the project, decided to join forces with him in Riverside, and together they led the transformation of the community. Over time, the community centers came to be run entirely by local councils, while Derek and Emma focused on developing new initiatives in Riverside, such as a social innovation center and youth mentoring program. The network of community centers, which had been born out of an act of kindness, continued to grow self-sufficiently, expanding to new places and adapting to changes in society. Derek, now without the pressure of public office, became a mentor and counselor to young leaders, always reminding them of the importance of acting with integrity, no matter how great the temptation to give in to outside influences. In the end, Derek's life became a lasting inspiration, not only to those who knew his story, but to future generations who saw in him an example of how a generous heart and an unwavering will could overcome any obstacle. Every time he walked through Riverside, where it had all begun, Derek felt a deep peace and sincere gratitude for the path he had traveled. He knew that the true power of an act of kindness lay in his ability to transcend, to touch lives, and to inspire others to do the same, bringing about genuine change that would last long after he retired. Over time, Derek became a leading figure in Riverside and the country. The network of community centers that he and Emma had started continued to grow, but now it maintained its essence thanks to the leadership of local communities, who managed each space with the same spirit of help and solidarity. Derek and Emma, although they had reduced their active involvement at the national level, began to notice that the project's influence continued to bring new challenges and opportunities, especially on the issues of social justice and supporting communities in crisis. One day, Derek received a letter from a young man named Caleb, who had heard his story and was inspired by his legacy to try something similar in his own neighborhood, an area with high rates of poverty and violence. Caleb asked her for guidance on how to start a community centre in such a complicated context, where distrust of institutions was very high. Derek, moved by the message and remembering his own beginnings, decided to travel to meet Caleb and see him personally. Arriving in Caleb's neighbourhood, Derek found a place marked by hardship, but also with a community full of young people desperately looking for change. Caleb showed her the few resources she had and explained that, although she had the will, she lacked the support and knowledge to start her idea. Derek, touched by the young man's sincerity, decided to stay a few weeks in the neighbourhood to help him lay the foundations of his community centre. During those weeks, Derek worked alongside Caleb and his friends, sharing not only his experience, but also teaching them how to fundraise, connect with organisations, and structure the centre in a way that truly met the needs of the residents. Emma also joined, bringing with her contacts and resources that facilitated the first steps of the new centre. Not only did the experience strengthen the bonds between Derek and Caleb, but it also allowed Derek to rediscover the direct impact of his work, reminding him of the reason why it all started. Soon, Caleb's centre began to attract children, youth and families who found it a safe place where they could learn and feel valued. This centre, still small compared to the national grid, exactly reflected the essence of Derek's early days in Riverside. The experience with Caleb showed Derek that the time had come to take on a new role, one that was more intimate and committed to shaping leaders who could replicate that model of change in their own places. Derek returned to Riverside with a clear idea to create a training program for community leaders focused on teaching them how to develop their own local initiatives without relying on outside influences or funding that conditioned their values. The proposal quickly attracted the attention of communities across the country, and within months, the training program was up and running, with Caleb and other young people being the first to participate. Under the supervision of Derek and Emma, this program became a platform for social change on a national level. Each year, leaders from different corners of the country came to learn from Derek, taking with them not only the tools needed to open their own centres, but also a strong ethic of social commitment and integrity. The program taught these leaders to work with their communities and not on them, to listen and respond to people's real needs, rather than imposing external solutions. Over the years, Derek and Emma proudly watched as leaders trained in Riverside founded their own community centres and developed projects that transformed their neighbourhoods. The network grew organically and decentralised, and soon there were autonomously functioning community centres across the country, all connected by the same principles of service and justice that Derek had established. At an anniversary ceremony for his first centre in Riverside, Derek was surprised by an event Emma and Caleb had organised in his honour. On that day, people of all ages and places, leaders of the new generations, families who had benefited, and citizens grateful for the impact of the project gathered. When taking the floor, Derek, moved by the love and support of those who were present, expressed his gratitude and shared a reflection. "I never imagined that something as small as changing a tyre on the road would bring me here. But now I know that every act of kindness has the power to grow and transform into something much greater. What I see here is not just an achievement of mine. It is the fruit of every person who has chosen to do good." From that day on, Derek continued to support the movement he had helped inspire while always staying in the background, allowing new generations to take the reins. His legacy, however, lived on in every centre, in every leader formed, and in every community that grew, thanks to the example of a man who never sought recognition, but only the opportunity to do good. Derek Coleman lived the rest of his life in Riverside, surrounded by his community and Emma, who stood by him as his greatest supporters. Her story, told and remembered in every corner of the country, showed that the true power of transformation was not in wealth or status, but in commitment to others and in the humility to serve from the heart. After making sure the community centres would stay true to their initial purpose, Derek returned to his life in Riverside. Although the project had grown and had a significant impact on many communities, he felt more satisfied returning home and continuing to work directly with people, surrounded by the friends and neighbours who had been a part of his life from the beginning. Each day, I watched Riverside flourish, thanks to the resources and support the centre had brought. Meanwhile, Emma remained his closest ally. Together, they supervised the activities of the centre and ensured that everything was carried out in harmony with the principles of transparency and service. Over time, community centers in other cities began to operate autonomously, allowing each community to tailor resources to its own needs. This model of independence ensured that each place could thrive without relying entirely on a central figure, and that gave Derek peace of mind, knowing that the project was sustainable and respectful of each community. Even though Derek had managed to establish a network of centers that continued to grow and transform lives, he maintained his focus on Riverside and continued to work alongside Emma on local initiatives, ensuring that the project always reflected the spirit of unity and help that had inspired him in his early days. As the years went by, Derek became a benchmark for community leadership and an example of how kindness and commitment could change realities. People flocked to Riverside to hear his story, and he always shared the same message. A simple act of kindness can generate ripples that touch many lives. The important thing is to act with integrity and let the actions speak for themselves. Her life, although transformed by the impact of her project, remained simple and dedicated to the people of her community. Derek had found peace and purpose in his day-to-day work, proving that he didn't need great recognition to make a difference. As the years passed, the Riverside Community Center established itself as a fundamental pillar for the city, and Derek became a symbol of inspiration and perseverance. Although he preferred not to be the center of attention, the impact of his work was evident. People from other communities and even local leaders began to see him as a reference for similar projects, and his story resonated nationally. With Emma's constant support, Derek organized new programs within the center, including youth counseling and job training workshops, as well as recreation and education spaces. These programs allowed many Riversiders, especially young people, to have access to opportunities that were not previously available in the community. Despite his success, Derek continued to live humbly. Each day, he took time to chat with residents, listen to their needs, and make sure the center remained an accessible and welcoming place for all. Sometimes, at the end of a long day at work, he and Emma would sit on the center's porch watching people come and go, sharing anecdotes and reflecting on how much the community had changed since they started. One day, a group of leaders from out-of-town centers gathered in Riverside to thank Derek and share the stories of transformation they had witnessed in their own communities. One of them told him how a young man who was previously involved in problematic situations was now a mentor in his own center and helped other boys find a positive path. These stories confirmed to Derek that every effort had paid off and that his mission to create change from kindness had taken solid roots. Eventually, Derek decided to create a small foundation in Riverside focused on supporting future community center leaders. Their intention was simple: to make sure that there were always committed people who could continue with the work of each center, transmitting the values of help and respect that had characterized their project from the beginning. Emma joined him in this new purpose, and together they dedicated themselves to training and guiding people who shared his vision. Looking back, Derek realized that it had all started with a simple gesture, an act of kindness toward a person along the way. Her life and that of many others had changed forever, and that impact would continue to grow in every center, in every community, and in every person who joined her cause. With his mission accomplished, Derek felt a deep peace, knowing that his legacy was in good hands and that his story had left a lasting mark on Riverside and beyond. As Derek's foundation began to grow, Riverside became a meeting point for those who wanted to learn and collaborate on the project. The city was filled with visitors who came with the intention of replicating the community center model in their own localities, eager to bring that spirit of solidarity into their homes. Derek, while always humble, found himself leading trainings and talks for these future leaders, sharing both his experience and the lessons of integrity and resilience he had learned along the way. With Emma's support, the foundation created a mentoring program in which leaders from different centers shared their experiences and strategies to maintain the independence of the centers without compromising the core values of the project. Derek and Emma were convinced that the autonomy of each center was essential to their success, and they focused on preparing these leaders to face the challenges of funding and external pressure, just as they themselves had done years earlier. One of the leaders in training, a young man named Leo, quickly stood out for his commitment and his vision for a community centre in his city, where the dropout rate was alarming. Derek saw Leo as a reflection of himself and decided to offer him special mentorship, guiding him every step of the way. With Derek's help and the Foundation's backing, Leo launched his own community centre in his city, providing educational support and vocational workshops for at-risk youth. Soon, the Leo Centre began to make a noticeable impact in the community, helping to reduce dropout rates and fostering a culture of collaboration. Derek watched the progress of Leo and other leaders with a mixture of pride and hope. In each of them, he saw the promise of a future where his mission would continue without directly depending on him, expanding with each new centre that opened and each community that benefited. Over time, the network of community centres became a kind of autonomous social movement where each leader committed to replicating the principles of transparency, service, and mutual support. Emma, always by his side, reminded him of the importance of celebrating these achievements. "Look at everything you've created, Derek," he told him one day as they watched a group of young people participating in one of the mentoring programs in Riverside. "Each of these centres is an extension of you, your vision, and the goodness you chose to share with the world." Moved by Emma's words, Derek decided to step back from his day-to-day responsibilities, confident that the Foundation and centres would continue to thrive under the leadership of their new mentors. He spent more time in Riverside, enjoying the company of his community and sharing anecdotes with those who had been with him from the beginning. Derek's life became calmer, but in his heart he knew that his legacy was in the right hands. Over time, Derek and Emma saw the network of community centres thrive across the country, each functioning as a pillar of hope and support in their respective community. On each visit they made to the different centres, they were received with affection and gratitude by people of all ages who had benefited from the resources and programs that the centres offered. One day, at an anniversary ceremony at the Riverside Community Centre, Derek was surprised with a special recognition. Leaders from the centre network, as well as community members and families from across the country, gathered to express their appreciation and honour Derek's legacy. He, visibly moved, went on stage and with sincere words thanked everyone present. "This work was never about me," he began, his voice full of humility. "It was always about you, about each person who decided to be part of something bigger. It all started with a simple act of kindness, and now I see how that kindness has grown in each of you, carrying it forward in every community. My greatest hope is that you will never forget that true strength is in unity, in service, and in doing good without expecting anything in return." With his words echoing through the auditorium, Derek ended his speech and received a standing ovation from everyone in attendance. Emma, next to him, gave him a hug and whispered, "You have achieved the impossible, Derek. You have changed the world, and that is something that nothing and no one can take away from you." Thus, Derek Coleman, the man who had started it all with a simple gesture on the side of a road, gradually withdrew from his public responsibilities, trusting that the project he had started would continue to grow and transform lives. He spent his days in Riverside, at peace and surrounded by the people who meant so much to him, knowing that his legacy would live on through every leader, every community, and every person who ever found a home in the community centres he had helped build. As Derek entered this new phase of his life, the impact of his work continued to spread like a living legacy that never stopped flourishing. Riverside, and many other cities where community centres inspired by his model had emerged, became examples of social cohesion and solidarity, attracting community leaders from different parts of the world who wanted to learn from this formula that had changed so many lives. Derek, while no longer actively involved in day-to-day operations, spent his time mentoring young leaders informally. Each year, he hosted a small gathering in Riverside, inviting new centre leaders as well as community members who wanted to share their experiences and wisdom. This tradition became a special event, an opportunity to reflect on the achievements made and to inspire the next generation of leaders. Emma, always by his side, became the bridge between Derek and the most distant centres, managing communications and sharing with him the stories of change and progress of each place. Thanks to her organizational skills and empathy, Emma also earned the respect and admiration of the leaders of each community, who saw her as an indispensable guide in the growth of the project. One day, Derek received an invitation to participate in an international conference on community development. At first, he was hesitant to accept, preferring to stay out of the media spotlight and continue with his quiet life in Riverside. However, Emma encouraged him to attend, reminding him that sharing his story could inspire other people and other countries to follow the same path of transformation. "Your story can be the spark that many other communities need to start their own change," Emma told him, with an encouraging smile. Convinced by his words, Derek attended the conference, where he was greeted with a warmth he didn't expect. During her speech, she shared how a small act of kindness had changed not only her life, but also the lives of thousands of people. He spoke of the challenges, the difficult decisions he had to make to protect the integrity of his project, and the importance of staying true to the principles of service and transparency, even when external pressures seemed insurmountable. His message resonated deeply with the attendees, and at the end of the conference, people of different nationalities and backgrounds came to thank him and ask for guidance on how to implement something similar in their own communities. With the humility that always characterized him, Derek shared his experience and encouraged each to find their own path, reminding them that the key was not to copy his model, but to adapt it to the unique needs of each community. Back in Riverside, Derek continued his usual life, knowing that his story and teachings now transcended borders. The network of community centers continued to grow independently, each led by committed leaders who understood the essence of the project and who, like him, believed in the power of kindness and service. As the years passed, Derek and Emma continued to be dedicated to their community and to the people who, like them, saw the community center as a place of hope and opportunity. The peace and satisfaction Derek felt as he watched his legacy spread was the best closure he could have wished for in his story. Finally, in an act of symbolic gratitude to all who had been part of their journey, Riverside opened a community library in honor of Derek and Emma, a space for learning and meeting that reflected their generous spirit and dedication. The plaque at the entrance to the library bore a quote from Derek: "Kindness, when genuine, becomes a transformative force that never goes away." Derek lived out the rest of his days in Riverside, surrounded by the people he loved so much and who loved him. Her story, marked by the power of a selfless act, continued to be remembered and passed on, inspiring future generations to see in every gesture of kindness a seed of change capable of transforming the world. Over time, the library honoring Derek and Emma became an iconic meeting point in Riverside. There, young and old came not only to read, but to listen to the stories of those who had met Derek in person and had witnessed his extraordinary journey. Visitors left their own testimonies of how the community centers had impacted their lives, creating a living archive of experiences and memories, which strengthened the sense of community and mission that Derek had initiated. Emma, who was always his inseparable companion, took on the responsibility of overseeing the library, making sure Derek's legacy remained alive and accessible to all. Over the years, he also decided to dedicate a space in the library for mentorships and workshops, where new leaders could meet and learn from the principles of leadership and community engagement that Derek valued so much. These gatherings, full of energy and enthusiasm, kept the flame of the original mission burning and reaffirmed the values that had made Riverside a special place. One day, while Emma was organizing a talk in the library, she ran into Leo, the young man Derek had mentored years before. Now an established community leader, Leo was in charge of several centers in his city and had driven initiatives that went beyond what Derek ever dreamed of. He and Emma reminisced together about the early days of their apprenticeship with Derek, laughing and sharing anecdotes of how Derek taught them to face every challenge with patience and humility. "Emma," Leo said in a serious tone, "everything I've accomplished is thanks to you. Derek's vision and dedication have changed my life and the lives of so many others. I will never be able to fully express how grateful I am." Emma, visibly moved, smiled at him and replied, "Derek always knew that the true success of his project did not depend on him, but on those who continued with his mission. Seeing how you and other leaders have taken their work to new heights is the greatest gift he could have received. Over the years, Derek's teachings were passed down from generation to generation. The community centers he inspired adapted to the changing times, expanding their scope to face new social challenges, but always maintaining the same spirit of help and respect for each person. Thus, Derek's legacy became a national movement, a network of committed people who followed the example of his kindness and dedication. As Emma aged, she continued to work in the library and community centers. His presence was a constant reminder of Derek and the mission they had both started together. In the end, the library was not only a building filled with books and memorabilia, but also a living monument to the transformative power of kindness and the lasting impact that a life dedicated to service could leave. In her senior year, Emma received a letter from Leo, who had hosted a huge celebration honoring Derek and Emma's legacy. The ceremony brought together community center leaders from across the country who shared their stories and accomplishments, all inspired by the principles Derek had instilled. Emma attended as a guest of honor and, with deep emotion, witnessed how her partner's legacy continued to grow and flourish in every corner. In her closing words during the celebration, Emma said, "What began as an act of kindness on a road, today is a network of hope, support, and togetherness that has crossed borders and generations. Derek taught us that the true power to change the world lies not in wealth or recognition, but in each of us's commitment to doing good. As long as each of you carries these values with you, your legacy will live on." The ceremony concluded with a symbolic tribute, where all those present lit a candle in honor of Derek, as a symbol of the light he had brought to their lives and their communities. Emma, holding her candle, joined the crowd with a smile of peace and contentment, knowing that Derek's purpose had been fulfilled and that his legacy was in good hands. From that day on, Derek and Emma's story became an example that transcended generations, leaving an unwavering testimony of how a simple act of kindness can resonate in the world, changing lives and planting seeds of compassion and justice in every heart willing to listen. Over the years, Derek and Emma's story became woven into the cultural fabric of Riverside and beyond. The library, the community centers, and the leaders inspired by them formed a network that spanned not just one country, but was beginning to receive international recognition. Organizations from around the world flocked to the Riverside Library to study his model, and Derek's story became a reference to the power of selfless service. As Emma aged, she felt the need to find someone who could continue the work in the library and preserve Derek's story as he had lived it. That's when she met Nora, a young woman with a passion for social work and local history, who had grown up listening to stories about Derek and Emma. Not only did Nora share Emma's desire to preserve the legacy, but she also had new ideas for modernizing the archives and making them accessible online for anyone, from anywhere, I could know their story. Emma and Nora worked side by side, and over time, the library transformed into a digital and interactive learning hub. Photographs, letters, and historical documents from community centers and Derek's early days were scanned, and interactive exhibits were created, chronicling how a single act of kindness had sparked a movement for change. With this digital archive, people from different countries could access Derek's legacy and adapt his principles to their own communities. With the library and its digital archive up and running, Emma felt like she could finally rest, knowing that Derek's legacy was in good hands. In his final days, the Riverside community hosted a celebration in his honor, recognizing the pivotal role he had played in expanding Derek's project and strengthening community centers. Emma, moved, looked at everyone who had gathered to pay tribute to him and understood that she was not only celebrating her work, but also the impact of her life by Derek's side. At the end of her life, Emma spent her days surrounded by those who had been inspired by her friendship with Derek, and who, like Nora, were committed to keeping the flame of his legacy alive. His departure was greeted with sadness, but also with gratitude. Riverside and every community touched by her kindness remembered her as an unwavering force of support and generosity. In Emma's absence, Nora took on the responsibility of running the library and dedicated herself to expanding the reach of the digital archive. Over time, Nora began traveling to international conferences and events, sharing Derek and Emma's story with new audiences and strengthening the global network of community centers. Derek and Emma's principles of compassion, service, and collaborative leadership resonated in every Nora presentation, inspiring a new generation of leaders who, like Derek and Emma, saw kindness as a tool for transformation. Decades later, on a significant anniversary of the founding of the first community center in Riverside, the community celebrated with a grand ceremony at the library. There, a statue of Derek and Emma was unveiled at the entrance, symbolizing their friendship and the spirit of service they shared. The statue depicted both of them standing, looking forward, with expressions of hope and determination. At the base, a simple inscription read, "Your legacy is our mission. Goodness, when sown, blooms forever." The ceremony included speeches by leaders from different community centers and a tour of the library, where images, stories, and symbolic objects from Derek and Emma's early days were displayed. The celebration was live-streamed through the digital archive, allowing people from all over the world to join the event from their own community centers. It was a time of togetherness and reflection, where everyone felt connected by the values that Derek and Emma had stood for with so much effort. Thus, Derek and Emma's story continued to live on in every corner of the world, in every community center that bore their stamp, and in every leader who was inspired by their example. The Riverside Library, which had become a beacon of knowledge and social commitment, remained a testament to how an act of kindness could spark a movement that spanned borders and generations, leaving an indelible mark on human history. As the years passed, the Riverside Library and its digital archive became a critical resource for the study and practice of community development around the world. Derek and Emma's story was now part of the education of future leaders and activists, who flocked to Riverside to immerse themselves in the atmosphere that had given rise to a global movement. The digital archive contained not only historical data, but also testimonies and personal experiences of those who had been transformed by the work of the community centers. Nora, who took over the management of the library after Emma, decided to start an international exchange program, inviting young leaders from different countries to work in Riverside and learn firsthand about Derek and Emma's legacy. Through this program, leaders from diverse cultures and backgrounds were able to collaborate, exchange ideas, and develop new initiatives inspired by Derek's founding principles. Riverside became a kind of social laboratory where ideas for community change were put into practice and adapted to be replicated in different parts of the world. One day, Nora received an invitation from an international organization to speak at a global summit on community development and youth leadership. During his presentation, he shared anecdotes about Derek and Emma and talked about how their unwavering dedication had forged a path that others could follow, adapting those principles of kindness and autonomy to their own communities. At the end of her speech, several attendees approached her, expressing their admiration for Derek and Emma's story and sharing their own dreams of replicating that model of leadership and social commitment in their countries. One of the attendees, a young man named Amir from a small town in the Middle East, was deeply inspired and asked Nora to help him set up a community center in his town, which faced high levels of poverty and conflict. Amir shared his vision with Nora, a space where young people and adults of different ethnicities and religions could come together and work together, overcoming the divisions that had fragmented their community. Nora, remembering the same enthusiasm she had seen in Derek and Emma, decided to support him every step of the way, providing resources, mentorship, and access to the network of community centers. Amir's center in his village opened a year later and quickly became a symbol of hope and unity. People of all ages and backgrounds began to flock to the center, participating in job training programs, conflict resolution workshops, and cultural activities that fostered mutual understanding. This center became an inspiration to many other communities in the region, and Derek and Emma's story took on a new life, proving that kindness and collaboration could flourish even in the most difficult contexts. With the success of this project, Nora realized that the network of community centers was not only a tool for local change, but a source of global inspiration that had the power to transform human relationships in any corner of the world. He decided to document each of these stories in a new digital archive called The Legacy of Kindness, where testimonies from leaders like Amir, Leo, and many others chronicled how the seed planted by Derek and Emma continued to bear fruit. Over the years, the legacy of kindness became an essential educational resource in academies and universities of social development. Students from different countries studied Derek and Emma's model, applying its principles in their own research and projects. Derek's story, which began in a small town, had crossed oceans and borders, sowing inspiration in all those who believed in the power of kindness and commitment to transform the world. Finally, at a commemorative event in Riverside, the digital archive was recognized as community heritage and a symbol of hope for generations to come. Leaders from around the world sent messages of gratitude and admiration, sharing how Derek and Emma's teachings continued to inspire change and promote togetherness in their own places. At that event, Nora, moved by the magnitude of the impact of her mentors, recalled Emma's words, "Kindness, when sown in people's hearts, never disappears." With that legacy intact and expanding, Derek and Emma's story became much more than an inspiration. It was now a guide to change, a reminder that, no matter the barriers, an act of kindness always has the power to change the course of history. Over the years, the legacy of kindness grew into a worldwide movement, symbolizing not only Derek and Emma's impact, but the power of each individual to make a difference. The Riverside Library was officially declared a center for learning and training in community development, attracting people from all over the world who came to study and share their own projects for change. This global network connected hundreds of community centers, all inspired by the same ideal of selfless service. Nora, seeing the growth and impact of the legacy of kindness, decided to host an international community leadership summit in Riverside. During this event, delegates from all continents gathered to share their experiences, successes, and challenges, as well as to learn from each other. Rural leaders, young activists, educators, and urban social workers participated in panels and workshops, all driven by a desire to apply the principles Derek had championed from the beginning. The summit was a resounding success, and at the end, Nora presented an ambitious proposal to create an international organization dedicated exclusively to supporting community projects around the world, with headquarters in different countries and a global mentoring program. The organization, dubbed the Derek and Emma Foundation for Community Transformation, would serve to fund, educate, and support local leaders who faced unique challenges in their communities. With the funds generated by the summit and the help of partner organizations, the foundation quickly took shape and expanded into regions where resources were scarce, but the need for change was urgent. The following year, the foundation opened its first headquarters in Africa, in a community where access to clean water and education was limited. Inspired by Derek and Emma's model, local leaders implemented a community center that not only offered educational and health programs, but also served as a safe space to resolve conflicts and foster respect between ethnic groups. This project soon caught the attention of other international organizations, and the foundation received special recognition for its contribution to peace and development in the region. Through each new center, each story of change, and each transformed community, Derek and Emma's spirit was kept alive. The library in Riverside, now a global symbol of kindness in action, was visited by thousands of people each year who found in its walls and digital archives inspiration to take Derek's mission to their own countries. Over time, the legacy of kindness was integrated into school programs, where students were taught about the importance of empathy, service, and social responsibility. Children learned from an early age about Derek and Emma's story, and many grew up dreaming of one day contributing to their own community. Nora, who was still in charge of the library and foundation, watched proudly as entire generations embraced the idea that a small act of kindness could have endless repercussions. At the end of her life, Nora left a recorded message for all those who continued Derek and Emma's legacy. Never underestimate the power of a good deed. Kindness is a seed that, once planted, blossoms over time and transforms the world around it. Derek and Emma showed us the way. It is now our duty to follow him and take this mission to every corner of the earth. Derek and Emma's story became known around the world as a reminder that anyone, no matter their resources or background, has the power to inspire lasting change. From its humble beginnings in a small town, the message of kindness and commitment transcended borders, and its influence would endure as a legacy of hope and love for generations to come. Thus, Derek and Emma's spirit continued to flourish, in every community where a helping hand was extended, in every project that prioritized the common good, and in every individual who decided to make kindness their life mission. Over time, the Derek and Emma Foundation for Community Transformation became a powerful and respected force globally. With locations on different continents, each reflected the principles of kindness and service that Derek and Emma had instilled. The community centers, supported by the foundation, developed programs that addressed local problems, from education and health to sustainable development projects and conflict resolution in areas affected by violence. Each year, the foundation celebrated World Kindness Day, a date when leaders, volunteers, and community center beneficiaries shared stories of change and hope. This event brought together people from different cultures and backgrounds, all connected by the conviction that an act of kindness has the power to transform lives and entire communities. During this day, workshops, panels, and testimonies were shared, and outstanding projects that reflected the spirit of Derek and Emma were awarded. The Riverside Library, meanwhile, had become a center for research and training in community development. Universities, non-governmental organizations, and students from different parts of the world came to study historical archives, looking for inspiration and practical tools to implement changes in their own places. Nora, who continued to work in the library, expanded her resources and collaborated with academic institutions to create leadership and community service training programs, thus perpetuating Derek and Emma's legacy through formal education. In the midst of this growth, a new generation of leaders emerged, children and young people who had grown up listening to Derek and Emma's stories, and who were now joining the foundation to contribute their own ideas and skills. Inspired by the legacy they had inherited, many of them innovated in community center approaches, integrating technology, developing environmental impact projects, and creating inclusive spaces for people with disabilities. This evolution of community centers enriched Derek and Emma's legacy, taking it to new levels of impact and adapting it to modern times. Nora, aware of the importance of capturing the evolution of the project, decided to write a book about Derek and Emma's journey and how its principles had given birth to a global movement. This book, titled The Power of Kindness, The Legacy of Derek and Emma, not only told the personal story of both of them, but also collected testimonies from community leaders around the world, showing how each of them had interpreted and applied the principles of kindness and service in their own communities. The Power of Kindness became a bestseller, being translated into multiple languages and used as a reference manual in social development and leadership programs around the world. Derek and Emma's influence also came to inspire public policy. Governors and social leaders took note of the results obtained by the foundation, and in several countries policies were implemented that promoted the creation of autonomous community centers, and resources were offered for projects that fostered social cohesion and empathy. Derek and Emma's story transcended as a universal model of change based on humanity and the power of individual actions. Nora, already in her old age, left the library and the foundation in the hands of a team of young leaders trained under her teachings and the principles of Derek and Emma. Once a simple building in Riverside, the library became a symbol of hope and a constant reminder that anyone, with a simple action, can trigger meaningful change in the world. Years later, in the Riverside Library, a commemorative plaque was placed with a phrase by Derek that had been repeated for generations. "Kindness is the beginning of all change. What begins as a spark in a single heart can illuminate the whole world." Thus, Derek and Emma's legacy continued to live on in every community, in every leader inspired by their values, and in every person who chose to make service to others their mission. Derek and Emma's story, which began in a small town with a gesture of kindness along the way, remained a beacon for humanity, reminding us all of the transformative power of kindness. Decades after the creation of the Derek and Emma Foundation, the world was celebrating the 100th anniversary of its founding. To commemorate this milestone, leaders and representatives from each community center gathered in Riverside in an unprecedented global celebration. The city had changed a lot, but the essence of the library and foundation remained intact, as tangible reminders that it all began with a simple act of kindness and a commitment to others. The anniversary event was broadcast live, reaching millions of people around the world. From small towns to large cities, people connected to remember and honor Derek and Emma's legacy. On the main stage, a group of young people, all leaders of community centers in their countries, shared moving stories of how the foundation had changed their lives. Each of them recounted how they had been inspired by Derek and Emma's story, how the principles of service and empathy had transformed their communities, and how they were committed to keeping that mission alive. As part of the celebration, Nora, although retired and in her last years, was a guest of honor and, with help, went on stage to offer a few words. In a slow voice full of emotion, he looked at the audience and reminded everyone how important it was to continue sowing kindness in the world. Derek and Emma taught us that kindness is a gift that never loses its value, Nora said, her words echoing in every corner of the auditorium and beyond. Each of you is a part of this legacy, and as long as there are people willing to help others, Derek and Emma's mission will live on. During the ceremony, a new initiative was inaugurated in honor of the anniversary, a global scholarship program in Derek and Emma's name, designed to train young leaders in community development. This program offered young people from disadvantaged areas the opportunity to study, train, and receive mentoring in community leadership, with the commitment to return to their communities to apply what they have learned and become agents of change. The excitement was palpable, and attendees saw this program as a way to ensure that the spirit of the foundation lived on in every corner of the world. The celebration closed with an emotional tribute at the Riverside Library. The entire community participated in a vigil of lights, each person holding a candle representing the flame of kindness that Derek and Emma had lit all those years ago. The image was awe-inspiring, a sea of light stretching from the library into the streets of Riverside, illuminating the night and symbolizing how every act of kindness, no matter how small, could make the whole world shine. In the years that followed, the Derek and Emma Foundation continued to expand, reaching more than 100 countries and establishing centers in the most remote locations. In each of these places, Derek and Emma's story was told to new generations, inspiring children and young people to believe in the power of empathy and generosity. Derek's phrase engraved on the library's plaque, "Kindness is the beginning of all change," became a universal motto, a reminder that anyone, no matter their background, could be the start of lasting transformation. Thus, the seed that Derek and Emma had planted continued to grow, spreading like the roots of a great tree that offered shade, shelter, and hope to those who needed it most. Although Derek and Emma were no longer physically present, their legacy lived on in every act of kindness, in every community strengthened, and in every heart inspired to make the world a better place. Derek and Emma's story transcended generations, always reminding us that, with a simple gesture of kindness, we can sow change that lights up the entire world. After that emotional anniversary celebration, the Derek and Emma Foundation continued its mission with renewed momentum. Inspired by the legacy and vision of their founders, the leaders of each community center decided to create a global cultural exchange project called Connections of Kindness. This program allowed young people from different countries to work and live in other communities, promoting not only skills development, but also understanding and empathy between cultures. Each participant in Connections of Kindness documented their experience, sharing the impact stories they had witnessed, as well as the life learnings they had gained. Over time, thousands of testimonies were collected in a digital archive that became a living extension of the original Riverside Library archive. The platform allowed people from all over the world to read and share these stories, connecting with the global impact of kindness. One of the most moving testimonies was that of Amina, a young woman from a small town in East Africa who, after having worked in a community center in South America, returned to her community with innovative ideas to address local health and education problems. Inspired by the techniques and programs she had learned, Amina founded a clinic and an educational center, integrating the principles of the foundation and transforming the lives of many families in her village. Her story became a global inspiration, and she was invited to share her experience at various conferences, where she spoke about the transformative power of kindness and cooperation. The Derek and Emma Foundation, committed to keeping the spirit of its founders alive, expanded its efforts towards sustainable development, launching eco-friendly projects in collaboration with community centers. These new programs ranged from reforestation and water conservation initiatives to sustainable agriculture programs that taught communities how to grow their own food and protect the environment. Through this expansion, the foundation sought not only to improve people's lives, but also to ensure that natural resources were protected for future generations. As sustainable development initiatives flourished, the Riverside Library hosted an international symposium titled Kindness and Sustainability Toward a Better Future, where ecology experts, community leaders, and activists came together to discuss how kindness to the planet was also a form of service to humanity. The Foundation, which had always defended the principles of respect and empathy, now also promoted the importance of caring for the environment as an act of love and responsibility towards future generations. Over the years, Derek and Emma's stories have become legends passed down in schools, homes, and communities, bridging generations and cultures through a universal message. Kindness is an inexhaustible force that transforms. With each new project, with each life changed, his legacy felt stronger and more alive, proving that his vision not only survived the test of time, but adapted and grew, continuing his mission to make the world a better place. Ultimately, Derek and Emma's name was honored not only as founders of an institution, but as symbols of hope and change. In every corner of the globe where a community center was named after him, people of all ages were reminded that a life dedicated to others could make an impact that would last forever. With each new challenge, the Foundation and its leaders knew that Derek and Emma's mission continued to guide them, reminding them that, just like them, anyone could be a beacon of light in the world, igniting the spark of goodness in the heart of humanity. As time progressed, the Derek and Emma Foundation and its community centers became a universal symbol of hope and change. On every continent, in the most remote communities and in large cities, his legacy expanded, touching lives and strengthening those who found in his principles a guide to overcome adversity and transform their environments. The Riverside Library was recognized as a World Heritage Site, visited by people from all over the planet who wished to connect with the place where one of humanity's most inspiring stories of kindness had begun. At the Foundation's last annual event, a symbolic ceremony was held at the Riverside Library, where each person present held a small stone, representing the individual acts of kindness that, together, built a strong foundation for change. At the end of the ceremony, each placed their stone in the library garden, creating a symbolic path called the Way of Kindness. This path, made of thousands of stones, became a physical representation of how every act of kindness can pave a path to a better future. Nora, although retired, attended as a guest of honor, and at the end of the ceremony she shared one last message. Derek and Emma taught us that kindness is the basis of everything. Today, its principles live on in each of you and in each community. This stone path is more than a symbol. It is a commitment from all of us to follow their example, to carry forward this mission, and to remember that every small action can create profound change. With tears in her eyes, Nora took one last look at the trail and felt a deep peace as she saw how far the dream Derek and Emma had begun had come. He knew that, even if they were no longer there, their values would live on forever, passed down from generation to generation. That night, Riverside was lit up by the light of thousands of candles placed on the trail, a tribute to two lives who, with humility and commitment, had transformed the world. The Foundation, now in the hands of new leaders, continued to expand, and Derek and Emma's name became synonymous with hope and compassion in every corner of the globe. In the most diverse and distant communities, their stories were told and celebrated as a reminder that every person, no matter how small or simple their contribution, can be the spark that lights the way to goodness. Thus, Derek and Emma's legacy was cemented as a beacon of love and service, and the Way of Kindness in Riverside became a sacred site for all those who believed in the transformative power of a life dedicated to others. Over the years, future generations walked that path, remembering and honoring the impact that a simple act of kindness can have on the world. And although Derek and Emma were no longer around to witness the magnitude of his influence, his essence remained alive, renewed every day in the hearts of those who chose kindness as their purpose in life. In the echo of every compassionate act, in the glow of every candle lit in his memory, and in every step on the path of kindness, his legacy was perpetuated, reminding us all that true change begins in the heart, and that a spark of goodness can light up the entire world, forever,